Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and in this video I want to introduce you to the new scrolling feature that was introduced for charts in Xcode 15 for both iOS and macOS. You'll get introduced to the scrollable axes and the chart scroll target behavior that we can combine with the chart selection that I introduced in the previous video on this topic to create more dynamic bar charts and display large sets of data. I have a starter project for this video, and I recommend that you download it from the link in the description and work along with me. Upon completion, you'll have a sample project that you can refer back to in the future should you want to implement this in your own project. Now, in order to do this justice, I'm providing you with a large data set that I exported as JSON from my wine cellar app. I have a lot of log entries here dating back several years for all wines that I've either added or removed from my wine collection. There's a bundle extension that's going to allow me to decode the data, and it will populate an array of log entries. So you see here that I have a property corresponding to each of the JSON keys, as well as a date component's computed property that's going to allow me to extract the month and the year from the date. Now my application is going to have to group all of these entries for each month of each year to determine the total number of wines either in or out for that month, and use that to create a bar chart entry. So for this, I've created a monthly totals struct that you see here. I have the month, the year, the action, which is going to be in or out, and the quantity. And then I also have a computed actual property that's simply going to turn the quantity into a negative if the action is out. I also have a dictionary of month names that I can easily use to grab the string for the corresponding month that is currently an integer. Now the log store is an observable class that does all of the hard work for me. And if you're interested in what I'm doing here, I recommend that you watch the video on working with large data sets that I did last year for the charts framework. I have two observed properties. One is an array of the log entries, and the other is an optional year, which is an int. When I select the year, I want to display the log totals by month for that particular year. So in the initializer, I populate the log entries array and set the year to the first year found. This year's computed property here just allows me to find a unique array of years that I can use in a picker, as you will shortly see. To generate the monthly totals, I have this computed property that I've documented the steps for here. But if you really want more detail, please watch the video that I just referenced. Initially, I'm going to be presenting the logs for each year one at a time. So I have another computed property called year totals by month that will return all of the monthly totals filtered by that year. So let's get started on creating our chart. First, let's create a private state property to access the log store. So I'll call it log store, and it'll be an instance of that log store observed object. If everything is set up properly, we should have determined the first year in the set of log entries, and the log store year will not be empty. However, as good coding citizens, we should check for this. So I'm going to remove the padding on the VStack and replace the contents of the VStack with the following. If the log store.year is not equal to nil, that's where we're going to create our chart. Else, I'm going to display a content unavailable view, and I'll just pass in the string no log entries, and I'll use the system image list.dash. We should never see this. Next, I'm going to create a segmented picker for the year and bind it to that log store year. So we'll create a picker using the string year, and as I said, bound to that log store.year. Then within the closure, we can create a for each loop using the log store.years, where the ID is self, to create a year iterator that we can use in the closure. And for that, I'll create a text view, and I'll use a string version of the year so we don't get the commas in a large number. And the tag will be the year, but since it's optional, we have to cast it as an optional int. Then I'll add some padding, and I'll set the picker style to segmented. So now we can start to create our horizontal bar chart. So for that, we'll first need to import charts. The data will be our log store's year total by month, which will give us a log total entry that we can use to create a bar mark. For the bar mark, the X will use the value where the label will be month, but the display will be the computed property's log total month name. The Y value will be the computed actual property, so positive if in and negative if the action is out. Then I'll add some padding, set a frame with a height of 400, and then add a spacer. Now we want to use different colors for the ins and outs, so I'm going to apply a foreground style modifier to the bar mark, where the color will depend on the action. So if the log total action is equal to in, we'll use purple, else we'll use green. And finally, let's add some annotations to the bar marks to display the total. So the position will depend on the log action as well. So if it's equal to in, we'll set the annotation at the top of the bar, else we'll set it to the bottom. And then we can use a text view to display the actual log value as a string and set the font to caption. And now you see tapping on any one of the segments will take me to and present a different year. Well, that's the end of this first part, but there's nothing new here. The problem I have with this chart is that when I select a new year, the chart axes change because there are different highs and lows. And this is not a particularly good effect because we lose perspective. Also, if I want to compare months that are adjacent to each other but in different years, I can't see them in the same screen. I have to jump from one segment to the next. So I'm going to change that in the next section. So let's see if we can do better. Let's add some modifiers to our chart. In Xcode 15 and iOS 17, there's a new chart scrollable axis method that we can apply to a chart, and it can either be horizontal or vertical. And since we have a horizontal bar chart, it makes sense to use horizontal. Now when we do this, the chart becomes scrollable, but we only see 4 months at a time. I do like the wider bar marks, but I'd rather see 6. So we can add another modifier that is the chart X visible domain. See, there's a chart Y visible domain if it was a vertical bar chart. And we'll specify a length, so we'll apply 6. Now I can scroll across 2 screens to see my entire year. Well, what I don't like though is that I can stop somewhere in between the bars. So just like we have in scroll views, we can specify a scroll target behavior so that it will always stop and show a complete bar. So this is called the chart scroll target behavior. And I'll start with paging. Now when we scroll, it will stop only on each full screen. I can't stop anywhere in between, so I'm either going to see the first 6 months or the last 6 months. So I want to change that to use, instead of paging, we'll use a value aligned and specify a unit. And if I want to be able to stop and view any particular month, not just halfway in between, I can specify a value aligned with a unit of 1. Well, right now we're only seeing a single year at a time, but I can scroll. So why not show all logs and let me scroll to any month in any year, and that way our axes will remain constant for all years. We'll no longer be able to use our month name though for our bar chart X value because each year has a January, February, so on. So let's go to our monthly total struct and create a new computed property called month year that will be a string, and it'll be constructed by creating another string using the existing month name, but follow that with a /, and then with the last 2 digits of a year. And we can find that by applying a string to the year to turn it into a string, and then use the suffix of 2 to give us the last 2 digits. So if we return now to our view, we can change our chart's data to log store all monthly totals. And then we change the bar marks X to the log month year. So now I can scroll to virtually anywhere within those years, but I can do one better. I can go back to my value aligned and add another argument here, which is a major alignment after the unit, and specify that our unit will be 12. So now as we can scroll and it'll jump between years, but still allow us to stop anywhere in between. Now our picker isn't doing anything, but we can change that. We have a scroll position that we can use. So create a new state property that we'll call ScrollPosition, and it will be a string that we'll initialize as an empty string. And that's going to represent what our bar marks X values are. And then add a new modifier to the chart view, that is the chart scroll position, where the X is the scroll position. Next, we can create an onChange method that will watch for changes in that scroll position. We can get access to the year by separating the scroll position by components separated by that /. That'll give us two components, and the year will be in position 1. And this is just the last two digits, so we need to prepend 20 as a string to this entire string, and then turn it into an int, and that we can then assign to our log store year, that observe property. Now, as we swipe between years, that segment changes. I'd like to do one more thing. I'd like to be able to tap on one of those segments and go to the start of that year. So let me go back to the log store and create a function that's going to allow me to find the first one in each year. So we'll create a function called firstInYear, and it's going to return an optional string. So we can unwrap the picker with a guard-let, else we'll just return nil. And then we can find all of the year's totals for that year by filtering the all monthly totals by comparing the year to the iterated year. And then the first one that we find then, if we do find one, will be the one that we want. And we'll want to return the month-year property. So returning now to our log chart view, let's add a new onChange modifier that will watch for changes in the log store year. Now we don't need the old or new values here, so we can use the new onChange modifier without any closure arguments. Within the closure, though, we can use an iflet to unwrap that firstInYear by calling the firstInYear function and assign it to the scroll position. Now when we tap on a year, we're taken to that year. That's cool. Well, there's still more that we can do. And we can use what we learned in the last video that I created on the charts framework in iOS 17 that allows us to select bars and present information based on what we tapped on. So in our case, we want to know two things. What's the X value selected so we can find the set of log entries associated with that month and year, and whether or not the position of the Y value is either positive or negative, so we can filter those logs based on our in or out action. So let's create two state properties for these values. Both will be optional as nothing is selected when the view appears, and the X value for our selected X value will be an optional string, and for the selected Y value, an optional int. Once we have these values, we can create a function that will find the specific monthly total log object. So let's create an optional state property for that now too, that we'll call selected monthly log. That will be that optional monthly total. Next, we'll need to attach the selection methods to our chart. So we can do that right now below our chart scroll position and bind each one to the corresponding state property. Now we have only to watch for changes on the selected X value, so let's create a new onChange method for that. When that value changes, we want to find which one of our all monthly totals, which we are iterating through, matches the month year and our changed new value. So we can use the first method on that array to find it and assign it to the state property. This will be an optional, and since we tapped on our chart, we'll also have changed the selected Y value, which is another optional. So we can use an if-let on both to unwrap them. And now that we have that, we know which set of logs we need to get. We know that if the selected Y value is positive, we'll need to filter them where the action is in, otherwise our filter will be out. So I want to create a function in my logStore class that can do that for us and create a new array of full log entries that we can use to present our user. So in logStore, let's create a new variable called selected log entries that will be an array of log entry, and we'll initialize it first as an empty array. Next, I'll create that function that I'm going to call getMonthLogEntries, and it'll have two parameters, a monthly log, which will be that monthly log total, and a Y value, which will be the int. First then, let's get all of our log entries filtered by comparing each one's date components, where the month is equal to the monthly logs month, and similarly, the date component's year for that object is equal to the monthly log year. Our selected entries then will be these monthly entries filtered once more by determining if the Y value is positive or negative. So if the Y value is greater than or equal to 0, we'll filter where the action is equal to in. Otherwise, the action must be equal to out. So returning to our logs chart view on change function now for the selection, we can call this function passing in those selected values. So let's create a way to present those. First, let's create a state property that's going to allow us to present a modal sheet. And I'm going to call this showEntries, and of course we'll initialize it as false. Now we'll need to create a view to present it as a sheet. And normally I'd do this in a new file, but to save some time here, let's just do this right here within this file, and we'll create a sheet modifier where the isPresented is bound to that showEntries. Within this view, I want to know whether we've clicked above or below the 0 line, so I'll have to unwrap the selected Y value, and to capture the chart bar label, we'll also have to unwrap the selected X value too. So now that we've got those, we'll create a VStack, and in that VStack, I'll create a text view that will display the selected X value, that's that string, using string interpolation, and follow that with a word in or out that will depend on whether or not the selected Y value is greater than or equal to 0. And then I can apply a title font, set it to bold, and add some padding. Below this then, I'll create a list to display our entries, but I want them sorted by date. So I'm going to use a key path comparator for my date property to create my array of entries. And now I can use that to create our list, where I'll get an entry iterator. Within the list, let me create an HStack. And the first item in the HStack, I'll convert the entry's quantity to a string, present it in the text view, and set the font to a title, and make it bold. I'm going to follow this with a VStack with a leading alignment. And then the first entry is going to be the entry's winery, the name of the winery, and I'll set the font to a heading. I'll follow this with an HStack, where the first view is a text view showing the entry type. I'll add a spacer, and then I'll finish with a text view displaying the entry date, but specify that the format is a date time showing the month and the day. Then let me set the list style to plain. And I only want this to show halfway up the screen, so I'm going to use the presentation detent of medium. And then finally, we'll have to have some way to trigger this. So in that onChange modifier, after we've received our monthly entries, we can set the show entries values to true to present the sheet. Now, as you see, we can tap on any bar and up comes our list of in or out items. I can either swipe to get new bars or use the picker to go directly to a year. Each tap will display a different set of items. I had to do a lot of problem solving to put this solution together, and this is something that we must do as application developers. If you want a free and easy way to improve your problem solving skills, check out Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. With Brilliant, you can get lots of practice in fun and easy ways. Now, Brilliant has thousands of lessons from basic to advanced topics, and more lessons are added every month. For example, Brilliant can help you present your charts in ways that represent information both accurately and ethically, and you can learn to group and aggregate data as I did for the charts in this video. Brilliant's both fun and it's interactive. So broaden your horizons with Brilliant. No matter what the topic you engage with, you're likely to learn skills that will help you solve problems, if not now, certainly in the future. Brilliant's guided lessons let you explore concepts at your own pace. And if you get stuck, there's helpful hints and step-by-step solutions that'll get you back on track. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer free for 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/StuartLynch or click the link in the description. And the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Well, I hope you've learned something here that you'll be able to use in your own projects. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to get notifications of new content as it gets published. Thanks for watching.